Okay, so we're ready for some AWS integration. This is the first AWS integration that I've done on this channel. So let's see how it goes. Uh, for those who are following in previous episodes, we got to a point where we were fairly comfortable with posting data into the database. And we'd stubbed out a service that returned a dummy user to us. But now it's time to introduce user authentication for real. And the reason I want to do this at this point, a lot of people will say, well, you shouldn't really build user authentication first, or you should build it later because what you should be doing is focusing on what makes your app important. Now, I would counter that argument by saying, yes, that's true. However, if users can't sign up to your app and you don't have a smooth sign up process, nothing else is important. So I would kind of challenge that thinking and say, get your user authentication right first, because if you're going to follow the early release often cadence that lends itself to startup success, you need to have a good user sign up flow. Now, I suppose that being said, I'm not saying this is a good user sign up flow, but I'm saying you need to be in a position sooner rather than later, where you can sign up users and you can get people interacting with your app. So with that said, I went ahead and off camera built this fairly simple registration form. It just asks the user for a set of details. If you look at the code for that form, I've set up a users view, and I've just used straight up HTML. I've got a couple of PHP requires, nothing too serious, but yeah, essentially all we're doing is stubbing out a standard HTML form here. So what I eventually want this form to do is, when we go start collab now, which is a submit button, I want it to submit to my app. I want there to be a service that kicks in and handles the validation. And then at that point, what we want to do is we want to come over to our user pools, and I've gone ahead and set up a test Cognito user pool, and I've got here the client. So we want to, by the end of this episode, have this form validating. We want to have the user pool. We want to see a user in the user pool. And if we get time, we possibly might want to also integrate the user pool, the Cognito user pool, with our existing security layer. So a lot of stuff to get through and not much time to do it, so we better get started. The first thing that I'm going to do is use Composer, and I'm going to install the Amazon SDK. My setup's slightly convoluted because I haven't got PHP installed in my path for reasons I've covered in another episode, but it still works. So yeah, we're just going to require the AWS SDK PHP. And what we want to do is we want to find the documentation for, we already have Composer, we want to find the documentation for creating a client, because what we need is a Cognito client, AWS PHP client, Cognito example. So one of the nice things about AWS is they've got things fairly well documented. So finding example code and things like that is pretty easy. The other thing that I didn't mention at the start is I'm going to be referring to this really good blog post by Sander Nape, I think, probably not pronouncing that correctly. He has gone through and in a fairly reasonable amount of detail documented the specific parts of the PHP code you need. So yeah, that's going to be a handy one, and I like that. So we're going to try and use that today as much as possible. All right, so looks like we've got everything installed. So the first thing I'm going to do is I want to create a user service. So we've already done this with posts. So if I go to application, I can see post service. So essentially I want to do the same thing. So I'm going to go source application users service.php. Oh, hello, I already have one. Okay, that's handy. I was doing some testing in a previous totally forgot I had this, but I was doing some testing in a previous episode, so that's a good thing. So we're going to use this existing service, and we're going to define a... Well, actually, do you know what? We've already got a save. So why don't we just use this? Yes, we're going to use this, but we might change it a little bit. I'm still, at this point, trying to figure out, like, do we just use Cognito as our source of truth, or do we have an extra section in the database? We might not need the extra section. I tell you what, let's leave it in for now, and when it comes time to making some more decisions, we'll make those at that point. Now, we've got a bit of bad practice here. We probably shouldn't be printing R from here. What we actually should do is just let the exception bubble up. So let's make that change. Clean house a little bit. And what we want to do is we're going to go to our old mate, what's his name, Sander, and we're going to grab his first snippet of code, which is the actual sign up. So this is what gets called when we're saving a new user. Let me turn this light on. I always forget to do that. There we go. This is what gets called when we save a new user. So here is where we would want to do the Cognito call. So AWS client sign up will call out to Cognito and create the user. Allow the user to sign up providing a username and email. If no errors are thrown during the sign up. Okay, so we're bubbling up errors, which is handy. Phone numbers, etc., etc. It's kind of interesting, his blog post. Let's see, what has he said? AWS Cognito stores users in user pools, so that's what we've got here. We've already set that up. The pool can be filled with users, etc., etc. Syncing it with the backing user management system. User ID, etc., etc. Each of these clients will receive a client ID. Interesting. I'm not exactly sure what he means by client ID. Wouldn't mind just having a Google of that one. Client sign up. Client sign up. Sign up. AWS PHP. User pool ID. Right. Client ID is this here. So this will be our client ID. Now, ordinarily, what you would probably want to do is you would want to have your client ID abstracted out, and you'd want a configuration layer to provide that for you. Now, at this point, we don't have a configuration layer, so I'm, for today's example, going to hard code this right into the sign up call here. But generally speaking, you probably don't want to do that. What you should be doing is you should probably be reading a system environment variable and populating the client ID from that. And the advantage of doing things that way is when you eventually get to a point where you're deploying this, you can have your different environments point at different Cognito user pools, which is advantageous because then you can test in a separate environment to your actual production users. But for now, we're just going to do it this way. All right, so let's go through the other stuff that this needs. So we need a username. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go to our form. We don't really have a username per se. I'm actually wondering if we need it, so we're going to comment that out for now. We're going to also, in this service, we're going to go string password, and we're going to go string password confirm. String password confirms. So what we'll be doing is we'll be feeding a bunch of the data that we collect from the form in the same way we have with the post service, and we'll be feeding it into this method here. Name, we're setting to value username. Let's set ours to first name plus, it's a dot in PHP, last name, that. And the email we already have. Okay, so we've got everything here. Let's make ourselves a quick to-do list. We need to validate password match. We shouldn't need to validate the password length because that's something that you set within Cognito. So all we really have to do here is validate the password. And to do that, nothing fancy. All we have to do is password equals password equals password confirm. And then if they don't, throw new exception exception. And again, like I said before, we're not too bothered with catching particular exceptions at this point. We can always, I like to do that later. For now, I just want to focus on just how the service is working, and then things like particular exception handling, we can worry about that later. So that's probably as much as I want for now. The last thing then we need is we need to figure out how we're going to pass this AWS client in, and actually what the type is. So back over here, the Cognito Identity Client Factory, right? We could have a bit of fun and games configuring this thing. Cognito, do we have? What type does this return? The factory accepts. What does it tell me? It returns, okay, it returns some sort of guzzle object. Now guzzle, as I understand, is a library for HTTP. And I would say the reason that they've written this is to get around the craziness that is curl. And it also does async, which is kind of interesting. So as it happens, Cognito returns a model, which is really interesting. And that's the client. Let's give it a go, I guess, because I like to type everything. So what I think we'll try and do I'm not quite sure if that's the right way to do this. We'll say this AWS client equals AWS client, like that. And then obviously we want to put this in here. Yeah, I'm not sure about this. It's kind of interesting that it would return. It's an interesting choice for a library to return an object that it itself doesn't define, unless I'm seriously mistaking how guzzle works. It just seems odd to me that a library, we've already done that. It just seems odd to me that a library would take that course of action. We shall see. Alright, so the next thing I want to do is make sure that my dependency injection is understanding this. So to do that, context, get component by name. We want to go into our context, and this context is what's responsible for instantiating everything that we need. So in this case, our user service accepts a database handler and the AWS client object. Now, I'm not going to put this into the context. I just want this to be something that gets passed into the user service. So at this point, we're just going to instantiate it here and be done. Let's fix up the tabbing, and this is AWS client, Cognito identity client factory, and then we want the use statement as well, so we don't mistype it. Like that. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. Now, I believe if I don't set anything here, and I just call the factory empty, AWS should look at the default profile that I've got configured. Now, I have a profile configured here. Don't really want to set that up. I don't really want to have to set up a different profile. I just want it to use the default. So let's just assume that that's how things will work for now. And then if I refresh this, I get a big exception. Okay, so it's saying straight away you need a region, missing required a region is... Oh, I love Amazon because they're so explicit about their errors. You can find more region information over here. We're a nice company and we don't do anything untoward. Okay, a version configuration is required. Alright, so it turned out that we do need those. Okay. So region is for us AP Southeast 2. And it's saying it also wants a version. A version configuration, specifying a version. That's right. Okay. Okay, so it's saying I should specify an API version. This is another thing that Amazon are pretty good about. Actually, they're telling me the version here. Okay, so let's use that one. Must be an instance of... Huh. So they do have that typed properly. Was I misreading the AWS SDK for PHP? Huh. Factory. Cognito identity client. I might... hang on, for V3 of the AWS SDK. Okay, so we might actually be looking at an old version where they have corrected that issue. Composer. So we've got... We have version 3. We're looking at version 2 here. Interesting. Okay, so now let's go to the version 3. This looks a lot better already. Cognito. They have a lot of services. I think it's Cognito Identity. I think this is the one we want. Cognito Identity Client. And have they got a factory? No. Well, this is, I mean, regardless, this is the object that we want back. So that whole gripe, and that already fixed it. There you go. So if we go back to here. All right, so now they're saying this is... So their version 2 API had a hard dependency on Guzzle, but they've since removed that in this case. So that's good, that's a win. Because it is a much better design. Let's... Not sure if I have to lead that slash or not. Let's try with it there. Yeah, we want to change it here as well. I think this just indicates the root namespace, which we probably always want, I would think. Okay, so that's that error fixed up. Let's just, for my own curiosity's sake, do that. And do that. Does that make a difference? Yeah, okay. So yeah, you need the leading slash. Cool, good to know. So let's do that. All right, so we're configured. Everything is coming up and getting constructed and not complaining at me, which is really great. At this point, what we want to do is get the data posting in. So to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to copy what we know is already working. So if I go views, we want to go to posts, I think it is, create. Yeah, here we go. So all of this stuff already works, which is really awesome. We just have to modify it for the user service, which shouldn't be too hard to do. So views, users, create.php, like that. Cool. All right, so let's grab this. Let's go users service like that. This will redirect us back to slash, but probably where we want to go is login. And then the response code is exactly the same. So all of this is working. Let's split these out into a couple more lines because there is actually a bit more to do now. So let's go back to our user service and make sure we get the functionality correct. And here we want to go, let's just go email, first name, that'll be last name, password confirm. Oops. Cool, looks good to me. So we come in, we match the passwords, we throw an exception, we talk to AWS, we ask to sign the user up, and then we write the record into the database, which I don't think we need to do, but now there's probably one for, actually, before we do anything else, let's just make sure that the form values match. So email, first name, second name. Let's change this to last name, because that's actually what we call it in the service. It's a lowercase l. Yes, queen. Okay. Looks good to me. What was I going to check as well? Email validation. PHP has an email validator, and you don't have to do anything. You don't have to write a regular expression or any craziness like that. Email validation, PHP filter. W3 Schools, how's your search rank so good after all of these years? Filter sanitize email. Sanitize and then they filter on. Now what does sanitize do? That looks interesting. Is that the same? It gives me a code example, but it doesn't actually say what it does, which is not all that helpful. Okay. I guess that's handy for trimming white space and stuff like that. Yeah, we're going to use it. We're going to go with it. Cool. users service. So filter a sanitized email. Let's use camel casing because I got that everywhere. Email. Sanitized email. And then sanitized email, and then here too. Cool. All right. Who knows what'll happen here? Let's give it a whirl. I haven't even tested the form properly yet, so you guys are just seeing all of this stuff. So, some email at somewhere.com.au. Represent. Let's do it. That's me. Secret. S-E-C-R-E-T. Now, that's interesting because I thought those were... that should be all dots. That's a bit of a security issue. Let's just make sure. Views. Password confirm. Name. I think I have to type password. You have to tell the browser. So yeah, we're live coding here. We're live coding. Alright, let's refresh. And I've got an error K somewhere. There it is. Goodbye K. Cool. Alright, so me, and there we go. That's password. So S-E-C-R-E-T, S-E-C-R-E-T. Cool. Don't save. Alrighty. So, the worst thing has happened. It's redirected away before we can see the error, so that's no good. So let's, for now, disable that, and if we get an error, we will see it. Secret, S-E-C-R-E-T, S-E-C-R-E-T, start. I haven't set up the route. That's what it is. So we've got views users create. Let's go to the place where I define my routes. At this point it is, where is it? Public index.php. Okay, so we have a register route, but we don't have a users create. And then this will be users create like that. And that will call that create view. So that should work. The other thing that we probably should test is that we're actually going to where I expect it to. So if I go to new.php, the action of this form is users new. Okay, so I have set that up correctly. So let's go back to our register, GISTR. All right, let's try again. First name Stuart. Last name Matheson. Password secret. Password confirmed secret. Start. Don't save. Okay, the same behavior. We're at users new, but we shouldn't be there. We should be at users create. Huh. Ah, silly me. It's posting back to itself. This should be users create. I looked at it and I must have been dreaming because I thought that was set to users create. All right, let's try it again. If you're developing in this situation and you find yourself in the situation that I'm in now where you're retyping and filling out the same password, look into a tool called Selenium. It's a browser automation tool. There's a lot of them out there. One of them's Selenium, one of them's Puppet Master, but they do all kinds of handy things like automate this kind of process. All right, so cool. All right, at least we've got errors, so that's progression of some sort. So type error, collab, save. Must be a type string null given. Argument 2 passed to user service save. Okay. So we'll go back to our create on users, and it's saying FIRST. Let's try that. We can refresh. Now this is saying you've already submitted form variables. I'm your browser and I know what they are. Do you want me to resubmit those form variables? Now, for testing like this, I absolutely do want you to do that. So I'm going to go resend. Okay, so we have invalid email address. Users service line 20. Is that the logic that we set up? Users service line 20. Invalid email address. Have I got the logic around the right way? I might not have the logic around the right way. This is valid if it's true, so we need to negate that. So we put a little bang in front, as we used to call it in the Ruby days. Whoops. Okay, yes I do. Passwords do not match. Can I see my passwords? Headers, cookies, params, SECRET, SECRET, so they do match. But again, I've got the same problem, so I've just got my logic around the wrong way. That's something I do from time to time. Let's try it again. Resend. Okay, operation not found sign up. That's interesting. Invalid argument exception. Operation not found sign up. That I did not expect to see. AWS client sign up. Huh. Now at this point I'm asking myself, have I chosen the right client? Because this is Cognito Identity Client. Now let's go to Old Mate's blog article. Now he hasn't. Check out my simple application on GitHub. He's already given us. That's very kind. Source. Now I just want to know how he's creating his client. Cognito Identity Provider Client, region and version. Cognito Identity Provider Client. Now that's Cognito Identity Client. He's got Cognito Identity Provider Client. That's different. Let's just check what version of the SDK he's using. So he's using 3.2.1. We're using an older version? Got an older version than the article that was written 2 years ago? we're going to roll with this for now, but maybe someone who... That's something I'm going to query and find out about, because I would expect there to be a newer version than this. Interesting. Okay. So that might not be it, but what I'm curious about now is this identity provider client thingy. So client... And he's just constructing the client directly. He's not even using the factory. So why don't we follow his pattern? Although that having been said, I believe Amazon actually now recommend that you use the factory methods. So maybe there is Cognito identity client, Cognito identity. Aha, it is a different API. Namespace, Cognito identity provider client, supported API versions. Signup is there. Okay, here we go. So, yeah, clearly we've used the wrong API. Factory. Interesting. That seems to be... it's deprecated. Okay, cool. So his looks correct. Alright, we should definitely do this. I'm going to grab that. I'm going to go back to my code, and then we're going to go back to the context where we set everything up. Here it is. Let's do that. Let's do that. Let's do that. Let's do that. Okay, so this client, I'm calling mine AWS client, and there, user service, AWS client, and then I don't actually think I need that. Oh no, I beg your pardon, I do, because I'm referencing that. So let's grab that. Okay, so yep, the API is fairly orthogonal by the looks of things. Amazon APIs tend to be very orthogonal. Okay, so that there. Alright, let's go back into our user service because the type has changed, and our user service will complain when it gets a type that it isn't currently expecting. Now I might make life a bit easier and do that, and then I think I can just do this identity provider client. That. And then AWS client, that's still called AWS client. Alright, that looks good. Let's try this. Whoops. Refresh, yes I do. Okay. API exception. So yeah, we were probably using a version that was set up for the other API, so let's grab this version, and I would say it would probably be different. 16.04.18, yeah, that's the problem. These are all different depending on APIs and depending on when they're published and things like that, so yeah, just pay attention. Unlike me. Okay, uncaught illegal argument. Exception, found error while validating input sign-up operation. Username is missing and is a required parameter. Okay, so it turns out we did need username. So let's add that back. And I guess we can just use email. Let's just use email. I think we can use email. because that will always be unique. And that's what they'll sign it. Yeah, let's just use that. Let's try again. Okay, exception, error executing sign up. Passwords did not confirm with policy. Password not long enough. Okay, cool. Now, if you go into user pools and go to app clients, is it? There's somewhere in here that will... here we go. Password strength. So minimum length 8, require numbers, require special characters, require uppercase letters, require lowercase letters. So let's drop that down to secret, SECRET 6, and then no. So we're really running with scissors here. Okay, save changes. Now, I'm guessing this is just should go past this error now. Okay, cool. No error. Good sign. Go to our users pool. Let's refresh. And ba-boom. There is our user. Alright, how are we doing for time? 46 minutes. Not too bad. Okay, so some email at somewhere. User enabled. Account status unconfirmed. So we've still got to go through the confirmation process for this user account, but everything else is done in a fairly rudimentary way. We have let's review what we've done. Context here. So we have instantiated a new AWS client. We've passed it into our user service. We have then enabled our user service to use that new Cognito identity pool. So our users are now getting our users, when they register, are now actually getting inserted into the Cognito user pool. And from there, because Amazon has a lot of really nice integrations, we'll be able to send them a confirmation email, and all of that confirmation email, generating the confirmation code, the link, etc., all of that is handled by AWS. So essentially, we've got passwords for free, we've got hashing for free, we've got the security of using AWS mechanisms, and it's taken us around 50 minutes to write our first user into the database. So I'm going to leave it there because this video is pretty long. The only thing that I want to actually do right now is when we go to users create, I'm going to re-add this here, and then we're going to go back up here. We're going to try it one more time, and I expect this to come back to my login. So some email to first name Fred, last name Smith, SECRET. Notice as well that let's just make sure that works. So that takes us, okay, cool. That takes us back to login, where obviously again we don't have anything. Let's refresh this, and there's the second user in our pool. Notice as well what we get for free. We can set all of these policies. So we can change our password length. We can do all those kind of things. We can change the days to expire. We can create clients. We can remove them. What else is worth mentioning? We can set triggers. So you can set Lambda functions, which is something we'll get into a bit later into this series, but you can set triggers. So you can do particular things when users sign up. You can create custom authentication flows. We've got analytics that is provided by, I believe, Amazon Pinpoint. Yep. So this is really, really powerful. And if you take one thing away from this episode, take the fact that you should never really ever in this day and age, write your own login and user authentication system. Just use AWS or a like provider. It doesn't matter if it's Azure. I'm sure Azure has an alternate service, and I'm sure Google Cloud Platform has an alternate service, but use one of those services because they will give you a level of sophistication out of the box that you wouldn't be able to achieve otherwise. Okay, so that's enough from me, guys. Thank you again for watching. Your comments are really valuable. Please leave them down below. I do read every one of them, and I will see you next time.